have, what do you call it, electrophoresis equipment, and so we did like a simulated fingerprint with our electrophoresis stuff. But the DNA extraction fits in nicely here, so if you have ever done that, you like doing it, of course you could do it again in a different context. It's fun and they enjoy it. So anyway, you guys have obviously this PowerPoint, but one of the things that you need to make sure that you do is everybody has to have a number, because there are lots of places where they are going to have to identify somebody else, and to check if they're right, you have to have their numbers. So you're going to be putting individual numbers on things. So I would actually, I do, because we usually do this a little bit at a time. I'll ask you to put your number on your sheet when we do it, so that we know that it's you. So this is about biometrics. It is about the measurement or description, the data gathering about individual characteristics that people have, so that they can be identified in some way. Most of this is done by computer now, but it's been done for a super, super long time, not using computers, generally using a card system, and usually by law enforcement, not usually by, although they do use some of it in schools and so forth, but record keeping has mostly been in law enforcement. So it's this card system that they've had on file that has that is filed, once they have fingerprints, was filed by fingerprints first, and then like physical characteristics, but they've always kind of organized their records in this way. So it is kind of a forensic thing, you can think of all kinds of ways to apply this in criminal investigation. But there are a whole bunch of different ways that we can see this, and these are the things that we are going to be looking at today. So we're going to be looking at eye retinas and irises, we're looking at facial patterns, facial identification, we're going to be looking at hand measurements, we're going to look at bite marks, we're going to look at fingerprints. So we added, like I said, we added DNA on there. So 2 sessions to get through all of it. Truly 2 sessions. I would never have imagined that, but the amount of time they spent drawing irises would boggle the mind.
How long are your sessions?
2 hours. So we're talking about 4 hours. Okay. It took them, don't you think it took like 40 minutes for them to they were so meticulous on the eyes. I was like, oh, come on, move along. But they loved doing that. It was really interesting to them. Because we pulled out our magnifying glasses so that they could really look at the other person's eyes. And they were just fascinated by that. Because think about it. When was the last time you really looked at someone's eye? It is really fascinating to look at, and they just could not tear themselves away. So, little video here. So I'm going to play this to start us out.
From the combat zone to the corporate office, from the airport to the ATM, knowing who's really who is a big security concern. Traditionally, a person might enter a password or pull out a driver's license or passport as proof of identity. But increasingly, identification and authentication can also require an eye scan or a well-placed hand. It's a science known as biometrics, recognizing individuals based on their physical or behavioral characteristics. The structure of the face, the geometrics of the hand, the ridges of a fingerprint, the patterns in an iris. Every person carries multiple human traits that are a unique form of personal identification.
The primary advantage of a biometric trait is that it belongs to that individual. You're implicitly connected to it. Unlike passwords or tokens or passports, which are external to an individual.
Arun Ross is a computer science and electrical engineering professor at West Virginia University, one of 3 institutions where the National Science Foundation is helping to fund a coalition of biometrics research sites. The Center for Identification Technology Research, or CIDR as the coalition is known, is an example of the important role that public and private funding can play in the innovation process.
The National Science Foundation does offer seed funding, but that is augmented with the funding from these corporations and government agencies.
CIDR affiliates funded Ross's 2005 research with Dr. Reza Derekshani, who was at the University of Missouri in Kansas City. Iris recognition systems process the full iris, so when the eye's gaze is off-center, only a portion of the iris is seen, and recognition is hindered. Ross and Derekshani proposed the idea that the sclera, the white part of the eye, might be an additional biometric trait that could be used for identification.
We asked ourselves, what type of information can we extract from the sclera in order to perhaps improve the performance of classical iris-based systems?
First, Ross and Derekshani collected digital images of eyes from dozens of subjects. Then they separated the sclera from the pupil and the iris to search for unique features.
We began to see the features that were on the surface of the sclera, but also on the conjunctival vasculature, the vein pattern that is evident through the sclera. So we started developing algorithms that can be used to extract features.
Computer algorithms are step-by-step instructions that tell the computer what to do. With fingerprint recognition, they are used to extract features called minutia points, the unique points in the fingerprint ridge where it ends or splits in two. With iris recognition, they convert the unique iris patterns into a binary code made up of zeros and ones like a barcode of the eye.
So when we say algorithms, really, we're talking about image processing algorithms. Algorithms that the computer program can use in order to extract features that can subsequently be used for matching purposes.
With sclera recognition, the algorithms extract features from the sclera surface and vein patterns. As they hope, the sclera proved to be useful in identification. Blood vessels, like fingerprints, remain stable throughout life. The computer program was able to compare and match this information.
We began to notice that the similarity between two images of the same person was much more than between two different individuals.
With the university's help, Ross and Derekshani filed for a patent, which was granted by the United States Patent and Trademark Office in 2008. Simona Quijel-Mayano, a research associate on Ross's team, based her own research on the patent, developing different ways to extract and match features found in the sclera.
I think she has really contributed in taking this research to the next level by developing new algorithms for feature extraction and matching, as well as the possibility of combining the iris with the sclera.
The research also caught the attention of a commercial venture, iVerify, which has licensed the patent for mobile applications.
We have to keep moving forward, looking at new ways to solve old problems, because what was unsolvable a few decades ago might be solvable now.
Solving old problems takes innovative thinking, and because of dedicated funding, researchers like Arun Ross have been able to work on new solutions with an eye for the future.
Okay, so obviously this would be a great place to bring someone in if you have someone that you know that's in computer science that does this kind of thing, a great connection with careers. So we're going to look at a whole bunch of different patterns. We're going to start with facial patterns. This one, rather than the eye pattern, we're going to start with the facial pattern because this one we kind of need to walk through together. So you should have a chart that says facial pattern descriptions. Okay, and you have a partner that you're sitting next to, so you are going to make a description of your partner, and you can discuss it with that partner if you need to, but you're going to make a description. But the descriptions are very specific, and this is one of the places that I changed this up because we had the girls just describe, and Matt was talking about yesterday how they have become, computational thinking, they become very, they need to have it match up so that they have it as something in the computer. So last night I started looking at description because I was just gonna leave it the way it was. But I started looking for descriptions and now I have them. So we're gonna start off. These are the things that you're gonna look at. They're on your chart. We are going to start by looking at the variations in people, right? The way people look. So the first thing that you're looking at is the face shape. So look at your partner and decide what face shape your partner has because you are describing your partner. Don't write your number on it.
No.
Don't write your number on it yet.
Don't write any numbers.
Don't write numbers if you did switch because you're gonna be describing your partner.
Oh, I write her number.
Oh, that's fine. Remember, you are describing your partner. You are describing your partner.
So heptagon looks like square, but also looks like rectangle. No, I'm sorry. I'm trying to decide. Four of them look kind of the same.
Okay, so make your decisions, guys, because we're gonna be moving on here in a second. So you decide what you think.
I would say mobile and.
Maybe this one's like.
I'm gonna say
Oh, this is.
Because you do.
Right.
It goes out this way. Very flat, and then comes down. It's all about this like pad, there's a pad of fat in your chin. So it either goes down or out or up. Right? That's what changes it. Right? Now, believe it or not, oh my goodness, you remember doing this, Carol? The discussion going on about the face shape was crazy. But they really, they really have to think about it. The one thing I do want to point out to you
I've never thought
is
of
that
now I'm
this
self-conscious.
part, the people that are kind of up here versus, it has sometimes to do with the amount of space that is made up by the forehead and what happens with the chin. Everybody has this fatty pad of, this is all fat down here at the bottom. And it either goes down, which is gonna make it more kind of like pointed, or it goes out, which means it's gonna really kind of disappear from view because it's actually coming outward towards the viewer. And so it's really about where that happens to be. Same thing, like the things that make something like a heptagon or whatever has to do with how far the cheekbones come out. So, it has to do with the facial structure. It has to do with that. All right, so second characteristic, eye shape.
Oh man.
You don't have purple.
Eye shape.
I'm just worried about my
I'm
glasses. I'm just looking at me.
Way too far. You can look at yourself and see what you think.
I think I have.
Look, 60% of these look the same. That's what I'm saying. What is mine? Oh, I know.
Like where like your eyes are really set back.
Okay, so decide and put it down.
What do I look like?
I'm gonna say up.
Like this end was actually the higher, but this side is a little higher. Straight.
That would be upturned. I call that upturned. Because the angle. Yes. Asianized when we can still be upturned. And then it comes down to the eyes, the way the eyes round.
Yeah.
They are everything. And then yours, I call it Indian eye.
Because like yours, like this part is a little bit lower. He said that like yours are here and yours are like.
What do you think her eyes are?
I think you might
I
have
don't
your eye or something.
Like upturned really do slant in some
Like
direction where
I think
like
almonds are
the
like
corner
really
eye,
like
I think it's
here,
your
and then you get really stiff when you're down on the nose.
Yeah.
Which I don't feel like I am.
But no, I'm gonna say yours are wide sets.
Yeah. I'm both. I mean, they're the same. Yeah, I think you're where you're at.
Yeah, wide sets.
I'm gonna say.
Okay, are you ready? Next one. Next one is eye color. Now I know that the words are really small, so if you feel like you need to come up to the front and look at them a little bit more closely. I agree. Yeah, my eyes are much more gray.
Sorry.
How many of you guys think your eyes change color? Yeah, they don't really.
No?
Well, what happens, not generally, it's usually people whose eyes change color. You have, when you look at the eyes, you can even see it in the pictures, there are, nobody's eyes are like all one color. They're like these little stripes of various colors, and depending on the light and the reflection, usually from what you're wearing, right? There is, believe it or not, a reflection or of light that comes up and hits, and certain wavelengths of light, that are reflected off, and that will sometimes make some of those little bands seem more prominent, right? They'll change the way you see them. But you don't generally, your eyes don't generally change. They do shift and change a little bit, but it can be.
What do you see? Yeah, why? Oh.
Yellow. They have more of a gray tone than they do, like, but, depends on what I'm wearing too. Mine are, yeah, mine are not like a normal gray, mine are more like gray. Okay, so decide what you think. Decide what you think. So you have to go with something. Okay, make your decision. Yeah. Okay, ready? Next one. Brow shape. There are fewer.
What time of day is it? What time of day is it?
Actually, the interesting thing about the brow shape is that everybody has like a natural brow shape, but now if you look for natural brow shape, if you just look up eyebrow shape on Google, holy moly.
Oh, I'm sure there's like crazy.
Yeah, because people like make them different shapes, so, but these are these are considered
But
the
not
5
soccer,
basic
right?
shapes.
I just
There's
put strings.
a lot to try and find.
Yeah, I started to, and I was like, I don't know. And then people would guess right away. And it's
Okay, make a choice. Okay, are we good? We move on? Okay, next one. Skin tone. And again, there are
Look,
so
I'm
many skin
two-toned.
tones.
Look.
You'll have to go with whatever you think is closest to your skin
I
tone.
would call them
Olive, I was thinking it was like.
And again, this, I believe that this is a makeup palette. This is from.
Yeah, yeah. Like I go to this.
Okay, so I'm gonna preface this slide by saying there are obviously other palettes, but it goes from a very simple palette like this to where it's like 50 skin tones. And the 50 skin tones are difficult to see on the PowerPoint. But if you wanted to make a color copy and like have color copies in sleeves where they can pick out a more appropriate skin tone, more power to you. Same thing with the eye color. The eye colors are a huge wide variety. And if you want to print out color copies so that they can pick something that's more, anytime you go with anything that's, there are so many variations. We were talking over here about the eye shape. There are so many different eye shapes and face shapes. There are lots of people who are somewhere in between, which is why we're doing so much discussion about which one you are. So realize it's going to be a decision they have to make, because when they do computerize this, they have to have a particular set value that they put in there. So this is the value that that I chose to make sure that we didn't have too many varieties. No shade.
Did you say a witch nose?
You don't have such a sharp like here.
No, that's
Angle, it's like a nice like
this is-
soft.
This is my
I never thought about witch shapes.
No, give me a little bit, and then the funnel also sees the other ones I think. So.
Maybe a tiny.
Right, those last two, you can see into the
But I feel
nostril.
like it's not like fast, it's not like sexual.
No, it's not.
You got a child, so I'm sure it's pretty straight.
Which might act so white, so we're saying, the third one is aquiline, which I think is what they call, they used to
No,
call.
you can't understand.
Aquiline is like, it's AQUILINE.
Because that's like where your table was down.
Yeah.
It's even this one, like,
Yeah,
it's
it goes like a little bit,
That's where
those are thin notes. Yes. Aquiline is first.
That's why like when I passport pictures, I'm like, you can't smile. Like, it's your face. She's too much.
I know,
I look sorry.
I feel like you're.
Yeah. When I'm looking at it,
I'm
What's
the
that?
ones who
What?
would pencil like this.
Trigger? Yeah, no, like that.
Sometimes.
No.
I feel like that's too
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
Okay, decision, are we good?
I'm actually gonna say one.
Okay, so put down your final answer. Okay, next, lip shape.
I don't think I need to.
smile, I don't have to make one. And it's the same as
Just keep in mind that you can't actually do this if you're smiling. You have to like be looking at your lips as they would just normally be.
I was just trying to, yeah.
I know, I'm like my dad.
You almost have like, just
Like a long
side.
outside your smile. I guess I've seen something like that.
All right, so decide what you think. No,
Doing good.
Now, you're kind of a combination too. Your upper lip is very, like, it's gonna be like heart shaped. And then you got the right side of your mouth, so you don't have this heart shape just because you've got that heavier lip. Yeah, put them up.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, ready? Last one is the dimples. Now, on the dimples, it's telling you there are long dimples, Indian dimples, mouth corner dimples, and central cheek dimples. But keep in mind that someone might have a left, a right, or both. Right? So they might have left, or right, or both. So you want to specify if it's left, or right, or both, and then specify the location using the label.
I know. I never thought about that either.
Oh, yes,
So
you may have to
Look at your cheek here and here, and then we don't have the cheek.
Yes, you may have to do a little bit of smiling, right? You have the two, I see that?
Or then.
So.
How do you like
Central
making
cheek.
stuff and then this one's more like. Well, I was thinking, like, yeah, actually do.
Central cheek.
And then this is.
Mouth corner dimples and central cheek.
Usually do have bristles on both sides, but it's more than
Yeah, so I have like, I don't know what you're doing.
one right here, which is
I
the.
feel like.
Yeah, we didn't name this one. But like, Oh, gotcha. All right, now, before we talk about what we have next, just so that you guys are aware of this, I chose the definitions of how, or how we were gonna describe this. When Carol and I did this the first time, we let them just describe, and it was terrible. Because they had no idea what to describe, and we kept going, well, describe the eyes or describe this. It was terrible. And so they really do need the structure of having some choices, because the only one that we used was the face shape. And so everybody had a face shape, and then the rest of it was a mess. So it's just helpful to do that. Now, you have your description of your partner. So what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna flip this. So what you're gonna do is that is the description of your partner. And just so that you know, you want when the girls come in and get their identification numbers, you want that identification number to be secret to them, right? We don't want everyone to know everyone's identification number. So they should know their identification number. So you're gonna switch, you'll give the description to the person it's describing, and that person should write their identification number on the top of the sheet that describes them.
And Lisa, you have the, gave us like this, something in here in the PowerPoint, but can you give us all of those things? Like the different.
Yeah, it's on one document. This whole section is on one document.
I see the facial hair and irises shape, but then it's not. Yeah, you don't have.
I will make sure that it should be, but
Because it would be nice to have all of these.
yes, they shall be. Thank you. All right, so now, at this point, we're just gonna try this because you will be doing this for every single one of these, but this is the most discreet so that you get a sense of what this will be like. We're gonna do all of the doing part, but not the searching part every time, but we're gonna search on this one. So right now, you should have your personal identification number on top of your description. I'm gonna ask you to bring them up to the front so I can scramble. Okay, there. Scramble up.
That's what I was thinking too.
Who is it? I know who it is.
Okay, now, one of the other things that you might want to make sure that you do is everybody's writing with their own pens, and this isn't a problem when I do Stellar Girls because I just pass out pencils and everybody's writing with a pencil. You're welcome. Okay, so, because right now we've got like 3 different colors of paint on here, so it's not a problem, but they will be able to identify, and if someone goes, oh, that's the green one, I wrote that one is so-and-so, that does happen. Okay, so I'm just gonna pass these out. If you get yours back, tell me, so I can give you a different one. Yeah. Okay, nobody has their own? All right, awesome. Okay, so I'm just gonna ask you guys, you've got all of these different things on here. Now, if you needed to, remember that I put the descriptions up. If you needed to, you could say, hey, could you put up face shape, because I'm not quite sure. But what I'm gonna ask you to do, look around the room, find your person.
I know each other, I know. Everybody look at each other.
You said it.
I didn't think about that here.
Yes, I am so yeah. Eye color is the easiest part. I was like, oh, this one's not a brown. That's an easy one.
Once you think you know who it is, come on up and check the number and see if you're correct.
I have an easy eye color, so.
So do I.
I'm like, it's not brown, so that's the easy one. Just want to make a few
Yeah,
options.
Which one?
The dimple, I just want to see
Sure.
the dimple.
That doesn't make sense. I mean, it's all subjective, right?
It is.
You think about it, it is.
Got a very different opinion from her about what my face shape was.
That's what my shape was.
I got more angles.
Right. And then the first I think
Did you play too?
To me, does not. Yes.
Okay, so once you have
Yeah.
once
I kept staring
you have it, just bring it up and like put it in the file.
Yeah, the dimple on one side of her face.
Are you 13?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure. Did you find yours? I did, yeah. You was on
Huh.
Are you saying?
Make sure you guys are still in circulation, because people might still be
No,
identifying.
Okay.
You're 96.
Yeah, like,
Are you
Can I not?
Okay.
I got my person. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, see, I disagreed. I thought I had a husband.
Got some angles in there, okay?
She's got, and I was looking for the dimple, and I had to wait till she started talking to see her dimple.
She's got it on one side flat. It's not on the other side, her dimple.
All right, cool. Okay, now,
That did not take long.
well, actually, it It took way less time with the descriptions up here because it is extremely subjective. And you might disagree with some things, but you're probably not going to disagree with everything. So there are actually enough characteristics on there that they can narrow it down, right? And certain things are going to be more telling than other things.
Anybody with not brown eyes is like, oh, I got hazel.
Right, or
Easy.
skin tone is also a big one, but it depends on who's in your room, right? It depends on who's in your room. So you want to make sure that you're choosing wisely.
She's who the other girl.
No, go ahead.
No, we were just talking about,
similarities.
yeah, I was trying to figure the two of them out. One, the skin tone was the one thing I wasn't sure.
Yeah,
about. She
well, and remember that skin tone and eyebrow shape were the two most limited characteristics that I gave you. I gave you less choices for those. And because of that, there was a lot more judgment involved in that. And that's gonna be, that's gonna be harder to distinguish between people. But there are lots of characteristics on here. It took us, because we did it unstructured, it took us way longer to do our identification. Because wow, whew, that was bad news. All right, so
Easier to make.
now, the next thing that we're gonna take a look at is we're gonna take a look at irises. And I, being the biology teacher, I like to spend some time talking about the eye, just because they don't really know very much, particularly at that age, but there are several parts to the eye. The black part is the pupil. That is actually, you have like, it's a lens over the top of the eye, but it's basically like a clear pillow. And behind the clear pillow is basically a hole. And the hole goes to the back of the eyeball so that because it really and truly is an eyeball, it is full of fluid. There is a nerve and vessels that come out the back, and then you have the lens up here in the front, and then this part right here, this is open. This is the pupil right here. So it's black, and it's black just because there's no light inside there. The light that comes in that you see hits the back here, and this, for lack of a better description, is like a nerve mat. It's a mat of nerves. The light comes in, it hits, it excites the nerves, it sends that down the nerve to the brain, and your brain is literally like right there. It is, in fact, there are a lot of human phys people who really consider the eye to just be an extension of the brain, and it's a part of the brain that's extended on the outside. So right here is the pupil, that lets light in, and it is a lens like a camera lens, which actually doesn't make much sense to them now because they don't really see the working parts of the camera. But this part right here can get larger and smaller depending on how much light is coming in. It's going to be very large when there isn't much light coming in because it's trying to get as much of the light as possible so that you can see. And when it gets really, really bright, it shrinks down so that there's not as much light coming in to protect the nerve pad that's in the back of the eye, because it will burn if it gets too much light. This part right here is a piece of muscle. It is literally a piece of muscle. So if you ever wanted to see what muscle looks like, that's it. The muscle, when it's just a muscle, is pink. Okay? Your genetics allow your body to protect that muscle or not protect that muscle, depending on how much melanin it makes. All of the color in your eye is one pigment only. It is melanin. I don't know what it's like the molecule color is. However, if you put a tiny bit of melanin in, it's going to look kind of grayish because it's covering the pink part of your muscle, but just barely covering it. A little bit more, it becomes a little bit of blue, a little bit more, it's a darker blue, a little bit more, it becomes kind of hazel, and then it becomes green, and the more you put on there, it gets brown, and then or like tan and then brown and then really, really dark brown when you've got maximum melanin going in. This part right here is the iris, and it lays down pigment unevenly. It's an uneven making of pigment, and it is like natural sunglasses. So if you have blue eyes, it means that the light coming through is not being at all blocked. And people who have blue eyes, when they go outside in bright sunlight, they really have to wear sunglasses, or they're burning the nerve pad in the back of their eyes. People who have very, very, very dark eyes, they have really effective sunscreen. Don't need to wear sunglasses except on the very brightest of days. Their eyes are really well protected. The sclera is just like a thick tissue coating that sandwiches almost all of the blood vessels and nerves, and you saw that in the video. But we're going to be looking at the iris. Now, the iris is fascinating to look at. You have a sheet with 2 eyes on it. I only want you to look at one eye, right eye. You're gonna look at that person's right eye. I have, I think, probably the easiest thing to use is gonna be the crayons. The crayons are kind of imperfect. I also have colored pencils over there. You can use whatever you like, whatever, and because you can really use anything, but want to look at their eyes. So I have magnifying glasses for you to look closely. Try and make that person's eye depositing the color where the color goes. Right? It's not going to look like just this one solid color. So grab a magnifying glass and color away.
We're definitely gonna need some
Okay, now I'm not gonna give you like tons of time to do this, because we have lots of other things to look at, but I want you to at least get a start on it, so that you can help the girls a little bit, particularly with the crayons, because I think that's usually what people have, is crayons. Maybe a few colored pencils, but not a lot of variety of color. Yeah, I haven't got my kids. Here.
I'm not sure if it's white or
What
flat.
did you say?
Maybe, I don't know. You know you're right about it. Yeah, kind of. I don't know what I was saying, right?
Oh, and you need blue, you got blue in there, white.
Not doing the sclera.
Oh,
just
we're
the
only
iris.
doing the, oh, okay.
Only the iris? The iris.
Yeah, that, the cornea is that, and then with the lens, and you have the cornea over the lens. And the lens is like attached by a little muscle, so it goes around and then the cornea is covered. And everybody's cornea is a little bit different. And some people's corneas have what they call an astigmatism, where it's shaped abnormally. And when that happens, the lens can't focus properly because maybe it's thicker up here and thinner down here, so it's going through more material. But we call it astigmatism. Yeah, and that doctor. Yeah. Yeah. So they sometimes see, I know, they remove it at the age of 5 or something, or they remove the cornea. Yeah, that kind of I'm not sure about Well, they do all kinds of weird.
Alright, I gotta do it.
They, surgery, when people have what do they call it? What do you call it?
Cataract?
No, cataracts
LASIK
or,
or,
thanks, LASIK. Basically what they're doing is they're taking the cornea, which is abnormally shaped, either too thick or, well, actually, it can't help you if it's too thin. If it's too thick or it's thicker in some places than others, they go with the laser and they literally just shave off part of the cornea. And they just take it off. Right? But they used to have to do that. Once they did that, they had to do it very well. They would put contact on top to protect better. Oh, look at that, that's beautiful, that's so lovely. All right.
No, you're good.
I guess I want, like, if we could bring some stronger, so we can bring it down and do the gator, not switch. Yeah, I guess so. It takes like an hour. Yeah. That'd be cool. And get the job. Thank you so much.
Your eyes are almost like a star. You have all these lines coming down. Yeah. Never really looked at anyone's eyes that close, I guess.
Yeah.
It's cool. Alright, there's your eyes.
I haven't finished yours yet. I do have like multiple colors. Brown.
They are.
Oh,
I don't think it's brown.
Draw the line, like,
If they have different bad, you decide to make it open better.
she said that she can start. Isn't that weird? Isn't that kind of cool?
Yeah, yours says that.
Yeah, this, like, it's, neat, this one. Yeah. Yours is cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, people get magnified.
Oh, yeah.
I just can't see it.
You can't, no, I don't think you really could see it without that. Because you won't see all those lines, but they are neat.
All right. I would love to have you guys do this forever, but I want to get through the other ones. But you can see how the girls are going to want to spend time on this. It really is, think of it as part of the STEAM of STEM, right? This is a little bit of artwork for them. And, it is kind of nice that they can spend time doing that. And they really do get very arty with this. The eyeballs that they drew were beautiful. It was really, they colored really beautiful eyeballs. So I know I would love to let you guys color, but we can't. So anyway, if you remember, while you guys are finishing up your drawings, I'm going to talk here. Remember, they were talking about in the video how this is how they're doing the coding into the computer. So they are taking pictures of the sclera, they're taking picture of the iris, that gets digitized and it goes into the computer so that when you go up to those little cameras, it'll quickly scan the eye and it only needs to pick up a certain number of characteristics and it should be able to identify people. The idea behind this is we would do exactly the same thing. You would have them trade, they would take their eyeball, they would put their eyeball number on it and they put it away and then they have to walk around and identify each other by eye color and eye pattern and so forth. So that would be the iris patterns. And again, you can see where a lot of time sucked up with that. Okay. There are some questions to debrief this when you're done. These have to do with both things, both the eye and the facial patterns. You guys, if you've watched any shows that have to do with crime solving, they have the face recognition software. That is a huge thing right now, especially because we have video surveillance and all of that, that they can actually, someone who's in the system, they can actually get a picture of them off of video, and they don't even need to have the entire face, but the distances between things and the angles, it's amazing what they can do with that kind of software. So this has to do with that kind of system. So this is hand geometry. They would do the same kind of thing with face geometry, but this is what we would do. And we're not gonna do this. I'm just gonna talk through to you how you would do this, but they're gonna do this, but with their own hands this time. So there are, you'll notice that I made a sheet with this picture on it because they really need to see the picture, but you need to specify what exactly they're measuring. So it's a 4-digit code that is going to represent their hand geometry. The A is only their forefinger, right? Only their forefinger. So they're gonna measure from their knuckle all the way to the tip of their finger. It really doesn't matter if it's inches or centimeters, but we try and stress that we're using centimeters. And centimeters, because of the way that they're actually spaced out, are a little bit more, they give a little bit more of a range. The B is on the ring finger, the distance going across the base of their nail. So this is where the base of the nail is, so they would be laying the ruler across so that it lines up with the base of their nail. C is this distance, right? So across the knuckles, so right here, I told my girls to go, it doesn't really matter where, as long as it's consistently measured in your room, it doesn't matter where you start, but I had them go from the center, right? They bent it, figured out where that was, and from one end to the other. My girls actually marked their hand to make that easy to find. And then the distance, did I cover all of them? No, distance D. This guy right here, again, you can see where it is. It's right here at the bend. So we marked from here. They laid their hand down, and this is kind of a strange measurement, but we marked, how did we do this? I think they just laid their hand down naturally, went from where the knuckle bend was to to the other side of their hand. So I think it was that. Wait. Yeah, from here to here. So you want them to specify, and to make it a little easier to identify each other, right? If they mark their hands with their marker, that made it possible for people to know where they marked. The people who do this for a living, they have specific spots that they look for, but they would be doing this. So they recorded their hand geometry. Then they did it with their partner's hand, so they compared with their partner. And we did not do this. However, if you were to split this into two, this might be a good place to kind of end. But basically, they were looking at the geometry of the hands, and they needed to come up with how and why this would work. So the idea and it's written out in here, the idea is that in teams, they come up with, the answers to those questions. But you can, again, have them go around, identify each other. There is actually a larger activity in there, but we wanted to do all kinds of stuff, so we chose not to do that. But there are some other activities in the instructions. All right, does this make sense? Anybody feel like they need to measure their hands? Okay, good. Because I'd like to get to the fingerprint stuff. Okay, bite marks. Bite marks, actually, ironically, bite marks have been found to be surprisingly unreliable in forensics. They try not to use this at all, but it is one of our activities. So this picture that's up here, we looked at as a team to figure out what made these teeth unique. And we talked about the crooked tooth and the fact that one of the teeth is behind, and most of the teeth are forward, and we just had a little discussion about this. And then we did our bite mark impression. So to do the bite mark, everybody needs a styrofoam plate. So if you want to grab a styrofoam plate, And you will also need a transparency film, so everybody needs one of these and actually a Sharpie. So go ahead and pick up.
While you're doing that, talking to them about why might the bite marks not be useful is another great, like, questioning data is a great computational thinking practice, I guess. The word is. It's on my mind because I lost my bottom retainer, and so now I have a tooth going rogue on me.
You change
Easily change. Yeah, right.
Never.
But this is actually a fun thing to do. And we're not going to go through the whole thing, but I do want to make sure that you understand what it is that needs to be done. So we're going to take the plates and we are going to bend it in half so that the two rims meet. It has to be styrofoam, which I hate. It doesn't have to be a dinner plate. It can be like a dessert plate and it should still work. All right, so it should look like this, right? So, okay, now, you're gonna be biting this plate in a moment, but we want to make sure that we have the top and the bottom labeled, and you wanna do that before you bite, because what happens is they pull it out of their mouth, and a lot of times what happens is as soon as they let it out, it flips and falls, and they have no idea, so you have to do it before. So we're gonna put an MX for maxilla, which is the upper jaw, and then on the bottom an MA for mandible, which is the lower part of the jaw, so that you've got it on the rim. Tell them they need it near the rim because they're going to be biting in the middle. And basically what you're going to do is you're going to bite the plate, but this is really important. You do not want to bite through. Right? You don't want to bite through, you just want to leave an impression, but you want it to be a strong impression. So, you bite and then let go.
How many times have you had a student bite through multiple styrofoam plates to be funny?
Well, I don't usually have them biting through plates, but it was amazing to me how many of my girls took a big chunk out of this.
Just like.
Yeah, I don't know why. Maybe because they thought it would be interesting. Okay, now the instructions on here, you can do this. Go ahead, bite. You can do this whichever way you'd like. You can have them do top jaw and lower jaw if you'd like, because that's the way the directions go to split it in half. But we found, mostly because we were kind of running low on time, and I told you we had a fire alarm, we actually found that we liked doing the entire thing. So what you do is you take your Sharpie, and you're going to, we have them label the MX and MA the way we had it on the plate. So we just labeled it. And then what they needed to do was any place that they saw an impression, any place where there was like a dip in the plate, they had to copy the impression with their pen. So like this is how my impression is looking right now. Does that make sense? And actually, I don't know if you guys can see that, right? So this is the way the impression is looking now. So try and be as true to the impression as possible. If they are connected, they should actually be connected. Okay, now, one of the problems with this is that as they're doing it, if it shifts a little bit, then, it's gonna be off. But we talked about the fact that in forensics, oftentimes people shift their teeth and so forth, so we're looking for, again, usually, I think that the rule of thumb is 10 to 20 points of match, right? 10 to 20 points. And you want to put your number on the plate and the plastic form. Or actually, put your name on the plate, put your number on the plastic form. So, name on the plate, number on the plastic form. Now, the computer would be doing this by looking for light spots and dark spots. And it would code that in. So, name on the plate, number on the plastic form. So do the best you can. And then when you're done, put your plates, here, let's put plates right up here in the front, like a small display of plates right up here. And there are a few of us that you would want to spread it out so they can kind of check it out. And you're gonna take these and I'm just gonna pass.
Label like what's top and bottom.
Yep. But we need your plate up here. All right, so no, don't sit down. We're just gonna compare one. You are not this one, are you? If you get your number, let me know. We'll switch this out.
I got my
Thank you. And take that. Just make sure that you don't have yours, and see if you can't find bite mark.
number.
Open your mouth. I had some bread stuck in there. Yeah, fun match. Okay, so, and actually, where's my clipboard here? So once you think you have a match, bring the plate and the plastic over and just check that you're right.
So it should be that I know.
Would be.
Hey,
Always one check.
Well, visit,
I think that's it.
our neighbor Kathy, you have very similar bite marks.
Yeah, I was wrong. But
You're wrong, but I'm gonna go with it.
Try that. No, these are all matched up.
Oh, I picked the one I meant.
Oh, wow, that's cool.
This one you use, that's very good.
We're gonna put that number on this paper.
You're
It's
right.
got those.
Yeah, no, you're good. Is that right? Yes. So still with Somerset South. There. Yeah. Number one is Renee. Yeah. Good job. All right, so that's basically how that goes, right? And so it's all about giving them the time to make their little mark and then walking around and identifying. And we just had, 7 of us doing it? So you can imagine if there are more, it's gonna take a little longer to do that. So questions on that? All right, it's actually fun. There is a little chart also that you guys were given that they can take a look at their teeth and do some measurements and so forth, right? They have the plate with the impression on it. They can do that pretty easily. So it's all about what you want to spend your time doing and how much time how many of these you're going to do and so forth. So the last one, here we go. The last one, like I said, we split this into 2 days and we spent some time doing fingerprint patterns. And so I wanted to make sure that you guys know how to do this. Now, the actual activities, there will be, if you chose this, there is a written set of instructions for this and some materials. But I have materials up here for you guys to use. I'm going to give them to you a little bit at a time because I don't want them to get too confusing. So we're going to start off, first of all, everybody is going to need an index card and you're going to need a fingerprint form because you're going to be making your own fingerprints. So if you would grab these and then I'm going to pull out the fingerprint pads.
That mixed with the eye thing, they just have
Yeah.
Sharon in there.
There we go. So I'm going to suggest these, the little round ones, because they come off your fingers a little bit more easily. Unless you would like to
These are actual
come
fingerprint
away.
pads.
They are. Still. Okay, so I'm going to explain the activity to you and have you guys do it. I would go through what the fingerprints are actually, they're little ridges. They have little glands on them that release oil, which is why they leave a print. But the ridges and the pattern of the ridges is unique to everyone, including people who are identical twins, because the swirly patterns on your fingerprints come from the movement of the amniotic fluid while you are developing, and that is different for each twin. So you have unique fingerprints. You have unique fingerprints even on all of your fingers. Now you'll notice that there is room for your right hand and your left hand on there. And then it asks you to classify your fingerprints, which we'll talk about in a second. But what I'd like you to do is take the fingerprint pad and use the fingerprint pad to put a fingerprint on there. Now when you do this, you want to press onto the fingerprint pad and you want to roll to the right and roll to the left so that your entire finger is covered. And then when you put it on the paper, you are going to, and you can do this whichever way you'd like, but generally what you want to do is you want to place it on the paper to the left and roll it to the right. Okay, and you don't have to push really hard. In fact, if you push really hard, you generally smear it. So go ahead, and usually what we would do is we would give them a practice sheet so that they can practice their fingerprints a little bit first before they actually make this sheet. But go ahead and make your fingerprints. Oh, actually, it looks. It's not going to be dark like if you used a stamp pad.
Yeah, okay.
It's actually a pretty. The ink is pretty good. That's our back finger. Yeah. Your steps with clear sheet A and the bump parts, not right B. Oh, and we put it in. Yeah, so we didn't just have to sit down. Now, these are like magic fingerprint pads. They are not like stamp pads. I don't know what it is that they do on these to make them so good, but they're awesome and they make really good fingerprints. They don't lay as much ink on your fingers. They're not as goopy. But they're good. They leave good fingerprints. Okay, now, once you've got your fingerprints for your right hand and your left hand, then I'm gonna ask you to use your right hand and make the best prints possible. Oh, actually, oh, nope, sorry. Totally doing this incorrectly. So this should be your left hand right here. What we're gonna do is we're gonna identify the shape of the pattern. We're gonna identify the pattern of the fingerprint and write the name of the pattern, its name, in these little boxes down here. So these are the pictures. However, I'm gonna give one of these to each table. These, by the way, are in the folder, or at least will be if they're not there right now, but they're part of the materials. Actually, I think we have enough that everybody can take a look on here. So look at these and then identify your fingerprints.
Identify the right hand.
The left hand. So that's the one that's closest to the sheet. So we're fixing both hands. You're gonna identify this here, the pattern here versus the left hand.
And you said that those developed from the, what was your training?
When you're in the amniotic sac, the movement of the fluid is how the fingerprints are formed.
So it's not genetic.
It's not genetic. It's environmental.
So should they determine what the limits for men and women by?
You know, I have no idea if they know that.
I bet yours is just plain whole. Or
It's actually.
These chickens. Some of them, no, we didn't use. Go back to the other one. Oh, this one here. See, this one. Oh, we're just doing the left hand, just the left hand, so what, ignore that. So now, if you're just looking at the left hand, yours is right, you're right. So mine is right. That's when you go plain or.
For sure.
Which one? This one? This is on the left hand though. It is moving. I think towards your lower finger.
But it's looking towards my basic finger.
They certain towards the little finger. That's here. This guy is his own. So.
So this one you please.
Well, this is.
But it's
And
not.
left here. This is.
You thought it was a plain. No,
Plain
that's a
world.
circular world.
Right,
Hers
this goes
is-
off to the side.
No, we thought hers
This
was,
goes
but it's
off.
not.
This goes off this way. This goes off this way. This goes off this way. This one looks like a little circle, and that one I can't. But this one is a circular.
Is that what this one is too?
Yes.
So just my thumb just smudged.
Your thumb was a smudge here, so it's hard to tell what that overall is. If I had to make a guess, I'm gonna say it looks to me like it's a around in this direction, that would be a radial loop. That one is a radial loop, this is an ulnar loop. Ulnar loop. Like this would be a
Circular.
Yeah,
Towards your,
and it goes towards your little.
I'm rubbing it. Yeah.
Okay, now I'm gonna stop. Has everyone identified their thumb pattern?
Yes.
Okay, the thumb pattern is what we use for this next activity, okay? But what they've basically done is they will have created an identification card. We've got the fingerprints from both hands. They have identified the fingerprints for the left hand, like the patterns. You have an index card, right? Everybody needs to take the index card, and you want to keep this so that you know what this should look like. And if you used your index card for other things, you want to pick up a new one. But what you're going to do on your index card is I want to, yeah, okay. So what you're going to do, and we did the left, so we're going to do left thumbprints. I know it says right thumbprints, but we're going to do left thumbprints. You're going to ink up your thumb again, your left thumb, and your left thumb, because I just inked my right. You're going to make 2 excellent prints on the index card. 2 good prints, exactly the same thumb. And the reason we do that is because most of the time they're going to screw up one of them. We want 2 decent prints. And you're going to put your number on the top of the card. Whatever your number is, put it on the top of the card.
Can the prints be different? Right.
No, we're putting 2 on there.
Well, I guess what I'm actually a little, so I'm doing this bottom part, but they can be, you can have different prints.
Yep.
The style.
Okay. All right. Now, this is how this activity goes, because we're not going to have time to do this. You have now 2 things. You have the identification card with and you want to put your name on top. So put your name on top of it, nice and big, so it's easy to read. And you now have the card with the number on it, right? Now, this is what we would do in the classroom. There are 6 major fingerprint types. And can I borrow this for a sec? So I would have, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So around the room, I would have a small label up with each one of these, plain arch, tented arch, and so forth. We would put them around the room, and then I would have my high school helpers do this, but we would take these, and whatever the thumb characteristic is, we would hang it under there. So I have an ulnar loop on my thumb. So I'm going to take my paper and I'm going to hang it under the ulnar loop sign. Does that make sense? Now, once they're all around, this is basically our categories. This is our, for lack of a better description, it's CODIS in the room. So then you're going to take these cards and they are going to do an identification of the perpetrator, right? Now, this is the police form. While you're hanging up the forms, they can be taking a look at this fingerprint form and taking a look for other characteristics. So we have the pattern, but we also have characteristics. Bifurcations, means that the ridge is split. Enclosure means that there is a place where there's some space in between. These are all things that you can find online. They're also part of the packet that you're going to get with all the information. It's really just an identification thing. So while you're hanging that all around the room, they can be finding all these little characteristics on this giant fingerprint. Does that make sense? Then, when all of them are up, then you're going to give them a card. Print number 1. I just picked up evidence 12. So I'm going to put evidence 12. I'm going to say, what kind of print is this? Oh, look, it's an ulnar loop. So I'm going to write ulnar loop. And then I have to find out who the suspect is. So I'm going to look around. I'm going to go, oh, ulnar loops are over here. And there are going to be like 3 or 4 of them here. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to identify who it belongs to. Does that make sense? Yes? Okay. I just flew through that. Do you guys have questions on this? Again, this is just the same as the facial recognition and so forth. It's just fingerprints. Okay.
Give me a chance to study this to kind of see, because you have to kind of read the smooth, slightly raised arch. I mean, they have to know what these are, so they're gonna have to take a little time to look through.
They are. Most definitely. And you will probably want to take a look at it so that you can help them identify. It's really just familiarizing yourself with the patterns is really what it is. It's very fun. They really like doing it. Okay. Does this make sense? Now, the other part of this is lifting prints with fingerprint powder. And there is an activity that you can do in there, but you need, the activity itself is just following the directions, but you need to know how to use the powder. So we're gonna do a quick tutorial on using the powder, give you guys a chance to lift a print so that you know what that is like. And if you've chosen to do this, you're gonna get a kit with the magnetic powder and the little magnet wand so that you can do the same thing with your girls, okay? But to do this, we're gonna gather around the table. I think it's easiest. We're gonna use that one since it's empty. So just leave your stuff there. You are going to need something to stick your print to. So I'm gonna give you the print out that they would have. So we'll bring this over here. And I'm gonna grab our magnetic stuff. Okay. So I happen to have enough powder that everybody can have one. So grab a powder and grab a wand. And can you get something from the other side? From right over there on that ledge. Okay, so I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try and do this so that we can record it at the same time. So hopefully they can see and you can see. So I'm gonna sit here for a second. I'm just gonna demo and then you can try it. There are 2 different ways that we do this. We can do this on glass and we can do it on paper. And everybody I've ever done this with disagrees as to which one is easier. So it's up to you. But you have a lot of oil on your skin. The girls have a lot of oil on their skin, so they should be able to just use the oil that they have on them. Otherwise, you can use like a vegetable oil. If you're making lots of them, like in the activity, I use a little bit of vegetable oil because I have oil on my skin, but then I start running out. Okay, so you're gonna do this yourself. If it's on the paper, if I just take my thumb and run it on my forehead, I'm just gonna touch the glass, and obviously, right, I stuck to it. And you can kind of see the print on there. It's like leaving an image on glass. Now, this is magnetic, which means that it's a little bit of carbon and some magnetic fiber. These little ones, and your wand is gonna look a little different, but it's also going to be a magnet. This is a super magnet on the end of a stick. This is a plastic sleeve because the magnet is really strong. So you have to be able to get it off the magnet. So the sleeve is important. So when you put it in the sleeve, and I don't know how yours will come. because I can't really, the picture wasn't very revealing. But when you pull up on the magnet, anything that's down here stuck to, if something's down here, it's gonna stick to the magnet and pull it up and it's gonna fall away. Magnetic stuff in here. So this is all the way down and it's gonna pick up a brush. Now, they are gonna try and pour this stuff all over everything. It is a bloody mess. But I always tell them they have to clean up all the magnetic powder when they're done and get it back into the materials. If you don't have very many of these, my suggestion is to get some Petri dishes, put a little bit in a Petri dish, and that's what they're gonna use.
Or even a little paper plate so it doesn't
Sure.
fall and
Yep.
you know, you can put it right back in.
Most definitely. And the great thing about it is if you do spill it down here, that if you use the magnet, you're gonna get almost all of it up again, right? A little bit of carbon will be left over, and that's just the way it is. But you're gonna pick it up. It needs to look like a little brush, and this does take some practice because it needs to be a little brush. You're going to dust it across like that, and then you're gonna let it go. You can blow some of it away. I did, I think, a marginal job. Scotch tape is fine, although, you know, there are lots of specialized tape. They're a little bit stickier, but Scotch tape works just fine. You're going to put it over the print. You're going to rub on the print as best you can. Make sure that you get as much of that up. Peel the tape up. It should pick up the print, and then they can put it down, right? So the print is on there. A light touch is helpful. Now, you can also do this on paper if you leave a print on paper and pick this up. All right, there's my print. Right? Now, you can have them just do it directly on the paper, but there is, you know, you can pick it up from paper too. So if I were to put this on here just like this, I should be able to peel it all up, right? And lift the print. Okay, so take a slide and, you know, try at least one so that you get a sense of what it's like. But when you get your own, if you decide to do this, you can play around with it as much as you'd like. Okay, so go ahead and try it out. And this is what the form looks like in there so that they can. I think you did.
I'm pretty sure I saw
I probably
the
did.
fingerprint too.
Oh, you're not doing
Oh,
Okay,
you know
so
what?
just
I'll
try
do
it out.
I just might try it out.
Sure.
Why not?
Whatever.
Did you get your?
Now, just so that the powder is pricey. For this, it doesn't matter. We just want to try it out.
The powder is expensive, so you want to conserve it.
Yeah,
You can
you-
use it from year to year.
You,
Okay.
in fact, this is the first time that we've purchased new ones. We've had our powder for 10 years.
Wow. That's great.
Yes. So they don't really have to use very much of it. So it's pricey, but it's useful for a long time. Wouldn't be if you were doing it every day, but not doing it every day.
Yep, I saw a lot of girls struggling with that.
Yes,
They want to smear it on there.
they do.
The more
Sometimes
the
they'll like
better.
pour it on there and
Yeah.
think that that's gonna make a difference.
Right.
But it doesn't.
Oh, if you touch the tape.
No, because you just left your print on there.
Yeah. I wouldn't make it in a crime lab. A lot of them say they want to be forensics on their
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it's
that
so
would be
cool.
kinda cool, you
CSI, crime
We
scene.
didn't know much about that when we started our careers. Can't think of anything that was really brought up. No.
Right.
You've done blood spatter and stuff, haven't
Oh,
you?
yeah.
With the high school kid.
With the high school.
That's awesome.
That is cool.
Be a little aggressive for middle school.
Yeah, you know what, I love doing forensics, it's so much fun. Actually, we did blood spatter in our STEM camp with
Oh, we
fifth
did.
graders.
We did.
No, like
Oh,
when
you did.
when we did it here,
Oh,
we
yeah.
did blood spatter with fifth graders. And we did our crime scene. It was not, we didn't like do like gunshot wounds. We did the perpetrator cut his knee and there were drops or whatever. And we did,
Oh, yeah, that's better.
we tried to keep it as
Non-violent as possible. Not like Dexter.
no. Now as you guys are
Dexter
trying
was
this,
good. That
as
was
you
a
guys
good
are
one.
trying this, I'm going to just explain what they do is they lift some prints, and when you know how we just did the identification thing, we have all the sheets all over the place. I make a sheet for myself, but I don't put I put a number on it, but I like actually no, I'm gonna have to think here how I did this. Oh no, I'm sorry. The crime scene, when you guys look at it, there are several different people, and you may need to set up a little bit. I used fingerprints from my students that they had done because we did them like over 2 days. But you could have anybody do fingerprints because there are, I think, for the crime that'll be in the package, I think there are 5 people. So I just put like random prints on there, and maybe what I'll do is I'll give you guys them all printed. The one who is the perpetrator of the crime, you'll want to put your prints on there, because what you'll want to do, this is the crime scene. They actually, the little crime is on there, and what you'll want to do is make some little squares of paper and just put your prints on all of them, and then they'll dust the print, and they'll have to look at all the suspects and decide who the perpetrator is using their lifted print. And it's fun for them to do because they feel like little crime fighters. But when the packet gets put together, I'll make sure that there is a place for you to put your prints on one of the suspects, and then the rest of them are done for you. All right. Do we feel good about this? You guys feel like with a little bit of practice you can make this happen?
Yes.
All right. So Mary has the last activity. So I'm gonna just ask you guys to bring the fingerprint powder back and the little wands, and we'll let Mary finish the training.
We go from the creative fun side to math.
Both are fun.
Those aren't mutually exclusive.
I like math.
Twice yesterday.
I don't even, that's
Yeah.
like the kids.
Oh, thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Right, this one's called,
Biodiversity saving what?
I like that one.
Health and beauty biodiversity. Okay, so you should have some supplies already on your table. You have a baggie, a brown lunch bag. You have a bowl with some beans. You have a cup, and you have a box of animal crackers. Okay. All right, so we're going to be doing some math and looking at biodiversity and population. So this is fun because the first thing we do right out of the gate is a little activity. So I would like you to get a piece of paper handy, maybe a journal, your animal cracker box. Go ahead and open it. Everyone should have their own box. For the sake of time, randomly pick out 14.
And then the rest are yours to eat on the way home. So just randomly pick out 14 to set them down. You don't have to really look at them, just pick them out. So again, 14 for you, the other 14, whatever. All right. Okay, so directions are on the slide. So the first thing is, out of your pile of 14, please just randomly take one. I want you to identify what the animal is, and then you're going to put down the first initial. So if it is a bear, you will just put B. And you're going to repeat until all animals have been used. List their initials in a row across your paper, and I gave an example like A, B, C, D, E, F, just until all those 14 are done. Next one, if you pick up a lion, then put L. So pick,
you pick the same number.
doesn't matter, just pick them up, whatever animal it is, put that initial, and then just put them across in a row. Yeah, if it is damaged, go ahead and just grab another one. That looks like a pony. Whatever you want, as long as it makes sense to you. And then list them straight across, keep them together.
Oh, this is a koala. Oh, wow.
Yeah, they got, they've expanded their
I
animal.
was gonna say, are these different?
Okay.
What if we have two? to-
Yeah, no, you just, as you pick out, just keep them in the order that you are taking them out. Again, keep them in the order, just list them, repeats don't matter. As long as you have your 14 when you're done.
So.
And if you're not sure, pick whatever you think is closest. It's really not gonna change much. Yeah, don't worry. Pick your best guess. It's not gonna be detrimental if you
Looks like a fish.
make a mistake.
No.
This is a zebra. The rhino. This is a bear, koala. This is a seal.
This is a jaguar.
Tiger. Tiger. That's a tiger.
Oh, this is another.
This is a jaguar. A tiger.
He's an elephant.
So the
Okay, I'll give you about one more
I
minute.
have a new animal called a rock animal.
Sorry, I'm gonna rush us.
That's slime.
This is a
No.
kangaroo. This is a, that's a rhino.
Okay, well, if you have a few, just keep going. But what we have on the board is the question of, well, what have we done? So if you were out in a field, in a safari, wherever, you're walking along, you might stumble upon, okay, there's this animal, there's this animal, this animal. What we're doing is a random selection. So you're just randomly picking these out and listing them down. Now, this relates to biodiversity. We want to have a large variety of any kind of living organism, plants, animals. Biodiversity is the variety of living species in an environment. So why is it important that we have biodiversity? Why do we want a variety?
We don't overpopulate, right?
Yeah,
Not get one of the same.
not too much of one kind, so,
The healthier there are, they're healthier.
okay. Survival of the fittest in a sense, the healthier ones,
Too many of one thing will affect the population. of all
and
the
affect food chains, food webs, if we take away something, so we want a lot of variety. Okay, now there are changes to biodiversity that affect populations, and that is something we use to remember. It's called HIPPO, HIPPO. And I'm not going to play the whole thing, but I just want you to get an idea here.
Hi, my name is Mary Pochmanroth, and I'm an adjunct professor of biology. And today, we're going to talk about threats to biodiversity. Now, biodiversity, just so we all have a good working definition, is the differences in life we find around the planet. Now, we all know that we have a lot of environmental problems, and these environmental problems are causing lots of pressure on all the different species around our planet. We can start by using an acronym HIPPO, H-I-P-P-O. Now, this is going to stand for the different threats that biodiversity is currently experiencing. First, H, that stands for habitat loss. Habitat loss is a real big problem. As humans continue to grow and expand, we take up natural native land for our mini malls and our houses and our schools and our roads. That means that organisms no longer have a place to live. I is for introduced or invasive species. These are species that have come from somewhere else. They haven't evolved naturally in the area that they were put there artificially, usually by us, and they have no natural predators. Many times they can outcompete for resources the organisms that are supposed to be there. Our first P is population. Now, you can probably guess we don't have a population problem with our plants and animals, or a human population problem. As our population continues to skyrocket, we need more resources and more space to accommodate all these billions of people. And when that happens, plants and animals, they're the ones that are going to lose out. Our second P is pollution. Now, pollution is a big problem, not just for biodiversity, but for human health as well. We get pollution in the air, in our water, even in our soil. All this pollution comes from the different products we've made and all the artificial chemicals we've created in the lab. Lastly, it's overexploitation. Overexploitation is taking too much from the environment, taking too much fish, or taking too much resources from the land, and this is causing a big problem. Here on the planet, we have finite resources, and these finite resources, there's only so much available.
Okay, so those are a few reasons for why biodiversity is important to have. And, okay, so how we measure that biodiversity is done in three ways. So the first two ways is they need to look at the richness of the collection, which is how many different types of organisms have been found. So I want, okay, never mind. So evenness is the abundance of that. Comparing richness and evenness of an area over time is a good way to monitor the health. And then again, obviously changes over time can be evaluated. I'm going to show you an example. We're going to look at your richness and your evenness of your animal cracker population. All right. The highlighted cream, that specifically relates to the animal cracker example. So it says to calculate the richness of the sample, count the number of different species literally found in your sample. So if I have the example of BBLSA, bear, bear, lion, seal, ape, then I only have 4 varieties. Okay, so that's the richness. So the bear is listed twice. Some of you said, hey, I got 2 of this or whatever. That's okay, it counts as 1 species. And then if you want evenness, you have to use Ni over N, where Ni is the number of species, and then the total of your sample is N. And that's like a typical ratio fraction. So if we look at the example, my bear, for evenness, 2 bears in my sample, Ni, my total sample N is 5. So you do 2 divided by 5, you get 0.4. And you're going to do that with each of your species of your richness, if I have 4. And then those total should equal to 1. Just again, like a ratio of when we learn fractions. So can you do a quick tabulation of your animal crackers, determine the richness. So you literally look at your list and count how many different symbols you have. Yeah, whatever you do, as long as you're consistent. Let me know if I need to repeat anything. So again, richness is just how many different species you have. Okay, if you finish with richness, then you could do, and you may not do all of them, but do evenness. So let's say you had 3 bears in your sample of 14. You're going to do 3 divided by 14. And you should have a decimal. And then just kind of list that on the side. And then do as many as you can of the remainder. But if you were to do all of those, they all equal 1. All those decimal answers should equal 1. All right, and let me know, do you want me to give you more time to do that, or do you got the idea? Because I can give you the time to do the animal crackers, because what we're supposed to do is you have a bean sample, a random sample here, so we were going to repeat this with the beans. But I can just give you animal cracker time, since we don't have much. Yeah, use your phone. So again, it's not, I think in 5th grade, they start learning about ratios and fractions and converting fractions to decimals and percentages. So, younger kids, they will struggle. Again, if you have the calculator available, at least they're kind of being introduced ahead of time a little bit on that. Or you could do it together as a group, let them tabulate the numbers of the richness, set up maybe the evenness, and then you could do the math together. Okay. Okay, so those are 2 basic ways of doing it. Again, richness, the amount, and then evenness. Sorry, the other way around. Richness is, I'm already going back. It's the number of kinds, and evenness is the amount of each of them. So what's next, more math, is that both of those are taken into account for something called species diversity index. It integrates both richness and evenness, and it comes out to a number of 0 to 1. And the higher the number, the more diverse the population of the species. So for example, if you had a forest somewhere, you could have a diversity in species index of 0.7, 0.8, where if you had an agricultural area, maybe it's less than 0.1. Okay, so we kind of have another word problem set up, but they've tabulated or listed all of the animals that they've encountered, like you did with your animal crackers. So let's say we had a forester go through the forest and look and see what kind of trees they encountered. So they've listed all their trees. So tree B, tree C, tree A, E, D, all along. So the first thing you have to do when you calculate and list all of your species is let's look at how many of them we had. Now you had 14 initially with your animal crackers, but if we look up here, how many do we have? And in the speaker notes, I do have all the answers. I think it was 26 or 36, I don't know. Someone have this slide open? 36. Okay, so there's 36 total. And yes, some repeat like your animal crackers did, but just what's our total? So our sample size is 36. So our number one answer would be 36. Then what they do is they group those into runs. And it's kind of like cars. You have a run where you kind of have in this case, it would be more like a 3 of a kind set. A run is when a different species is encountered than the previous one along a transect or sample. So in that set, we see B, then we see C. Okay, those are different. So each of those would be an independent run. But then we see AAA. So that would be one run because they're the 3 of the same kind. So if we look at those, how many runs do we have? Okay, 12. Okay? And then you could even look at your animal crackers right now, and depending on the order of you pulling them out, if any of them repeated, that would be considered a run. Okay, so we have in our formula, it's the number of runs divided by your total in your sample. Again, a typical ratio. So we have 12 at the top, 36 is our total. Divide that out, 0.33. So the diversity index of this sample question is 0.33. It's kind of low. So if we did it with my animal cracker examples where we have BBLSA, we would have 4 as our runs because BB would be 1. Then L, S, and A. But I have 5 in that sample, so it would be 4 divided by 5, 0.8. So our diversity index is pretty high. So why don't you do that real quick then with your animal crackers. So figure out your diversity index. Again, how many runs do you have? Everyone's going to be over 14.
Number of things that I have, like the number of.
It's how many
E, I got 2 L's.
in a row that you have, but it's completely based on the order that you are counting.
It's like this is
So
like
you listing them like that
there's no
is helpful for evenness, but then that's. So if I look here, I have a B that's separate, and then an E that's separate, so it's 2 runs. Then I have B again, that's a 3rd run, because they're not together, so they count individually.
Okay, so that would be 3rd run.
Yeah.
Runs are 12.
Okay, now this was just, okay, that was just for the first one. This was
Yes.
how you do the run.
Correct, so
The Gemini
richness and
understanding.
evenness are 2 kind of separate things that connect into diversity index. So the 3rd way of calculating population and biodiversity with the index is by checking the runs over your total in the same one. So a run is anything where you
Every
have
time you hit these species, 1 year.
a repeated species and then a different one. So anytime you see a different one, that's a new run.
Okay, so it's just, so this would be.
Yes,
this is the
1,
first run.
2, 3, 4, 5, 6 for both.
This would be 6 for both of these, okay.
Then E stuff is the 7th run.
A,
And if those are those both K's or is it a K and an R?
K and R.
12, so 13.
13, so it's 13.
Yes.
But these 2 are together, so they just consider one
Yes.
run. Okay. I see what
And
you're
then
saying.
14 is your total sample size, so you would have 13 over 14.
Yeah. Yeah.
So my thought is based looking at all your codes, I think your animal cracker box habitat probably has a lot of diversity. Yeah. Yep. But in nature, you know, if you're out sampling or looking at whether it's flowers, different plant types, animal species within a certain ecosystem or area, again, you're only tabulating with what you would then actually have seen. Okay, so like I said, we were going to do that with the beans that were in the bag, but we won't do that. This is
it really is just like applying what.
it's literally it's like a plug and chug. I remember from school. You know, you've got formulas, you've got a very specific way of doing it, and you just plug in your data. So this, what's in your bag is the 15 different kinds of beans that soup. And so what you would do is you put in, we put in 30 of them in there, and you would have the girls identify them. And Kathy had made previously, and I will be doing this, I have not done that, but she put them on a poster and labeled them so the kids could identify them so much easier because so many of them look similar. Your great lima beans versus your small lima bean. So similar. Be something handy to think about ahead of time. And I also was Googling pictures of them and I could figure it out. But yeah, take a picture. Okay, and then the last activity, which I'll just do a quick, is estimating population size. Again, in a natural area. It's called mark and recapture, and that's what we had with the bowls. They're all the same kind of bean in that bowl. I think those are pinto beans. And then you should have like a small Dixie cup. So basically what this is saying, yeah, you might be able to go through and look at your biodiversity of the area, but let's say you wanted to know, how many robins there were specifically. Like you didn't really want to know what other animals were there, but you wanted to focus on one species. Then what we would do here is it's called mark and recapture. And we see that in nature with scientists tagging animals and putting markers on them. So in this case, what you do is you would get a small cup. The kids could, just do like a random scoop out of their little habitat, that's the bowl. And then you would take a permanent marker and then they would mark every single bean that they initially had with the marker. They would take a count of those that were captured. Their the lesson form that's in there, I think has a data table that goes along with it. Then they would literally put them back into the bowl, into the pile, like you're releasing them back into nature. Yeah, and I have a copy of the table. Okay, then they're going to use the cup. They can use an aquarium net to make it more random, where they're like scooping up, or they just take that cup, scoop up, do another sample. So naturally, probably some of them will have the permanent marker marks that you made out of them, some won't. So then what they're going to do is they're going to count and record the total number of beans that they collected, how many were marked, how many were not marked, and then we're going to kind of keep tabulating that. And then what they're going to do is make a ratio out of that, total number that were marked out of their total, and then they're going to keep doing this over several occasions. We wrote about 6 here. Finally, maybe after about the 6th trial of them constantly scooping up, marking them, how many they have marked, how many do they not, then we're going to put in a proportion. So here this proportion is marked beans in the sample, and they're going to do this for every trial of when they scoop them out. So if you notice here in that trial number 1, that will be officially like the second scoop, because the very first scoop where they mark them all, that doesn't count. It's once they dump them in and then take out that second one. So trial 1 will be that second time. It's listed right here. This is trial 1. And so total marked beans in their sample over the total beans in their sample. So for trial 1, I got 5 that were marked, but I had a total of 10 of them. That's going to equal to total marked beans in the bowl over total beans in your bowl. So then they're going to say, well, when I'm done with this after 6 rounds, I'm gonna count and see how many were totally marked after all my times, and then how many beans ultimately do I have in that bowl. And then of course, X is going to be the total beans in the bowl, which we won't know. So then you're going to do your proportion, cross multiply, divide. And again, the littles, 3rd grade, 4th grade won't know how to do that. So, one thing you could do is just maybe look at the total that they've collected and just kind of analyze what's happening to the total mark as we go through the procedure. Maybe you could set that up and just do the math for them. You could also reduce it and then do the cross multiplying and dividing. But I think 5th grade, but definitely 6th grade, they know this. Okay, so that is just some reflection questions and how it can relate to real life, and that's it for that. So like I said, it's very specific. Just follow the order, follow the formulas, and you should be able to do that.
It's really authentic though to what is actually done out in nature, and or
Yes.
what scientists actually do to calculate population sizes. So it's it's really accurate.
Yeah, I mean, people's jobs is to go out in the field on how many occasions and let's check my, 10 square foot area and count how many diverse things I see in that area. Then they tabulate that. All right, so that was a lot of math right there. Okay.